Hello, and welcome to the National Museum of the United States Navy. My name is Mike, and for our first theme Saturday here, we're going to talk about radio detection and ranging, or as you better know it, radar. So let's start with what happened before radar. How does a Navy vessel see a hazard upcoming on the horizon? Well, just as I described, they see it, they look for it, it's line of sight. There are going to be sailors up in the rigging in the age of sail or in some high point in later eras who are going to be watching through telescopes, binoculars, other optics to see if there's some sort of storm coming, the enemy is coming, or whatever else. There's also going to be at some point aircraft that can be sent off to check out and a little bit further ahead of the vessels. However, there's no great long distance answer yet. This is going to come much later. This is going to come in the 20th century, and it's going to come in the form of radar. It's going to be very advantageous because if you think about it, if you can only run away from or react to stuff that's within sight, it's much closer to you, isn't it? So if it's that much closer to you and it's a much stronger, faster vessel, what are you going to do? You're going to have that much less time to save your crew, to save your sailors. In one way or another, whether it be by standing and fighting or by withdrawing, beating a hasty retreat and fighting again another day. By the late 19th century, we're starting to experiment more and more with radio waves. So radio waves are going to be sent out and various European nations are going to realize various different possibilities for these radio waves. The United States is not going to be that far behind, and frankly, most nations are going to start seriously researching radar itself around the 1930s. And in the 1930s, the U.S. Naval Research Laboratory right here in Washington, D.C. is going to start experimenting with their own sorts of radio. And actually, you can see a remnant of this behind me. This is an XAF radar receiver right here that's going to be one of the earlier developed by the Naval Research Laboratory. So how does a radar exactly work? What are they doing? Well, like I said, this is just the receiver. So this is just kind of where the sailors, the technicians, are going to be controlling the actual device itself. So there's going to be a transmitting antenna, which is going to send out signals that are going to bounce off, essentially. It's these energy waves that are going to bounce off distant objects. And it's going to kind of diffract. It's going to scatter in various directions, but the most important ones are those that are going to come back to the receiver. There's going to be an antenna, receiver antenna that is going to take in these signals and bring them back to the receiver set here where a sailor is going to be waiting to interpret what exactly is going on around them. This is going to give sailors, it's going to give the Navy sight beyond the sight line. And that's going to give precious moments which you can use in order to keep your sailors safer and conduct maneuvers more successfully. So we have a little kind of a demonstration set up for you. That we can go ahead and start on. What you're essentially going to need is a ball or a ping pong ball, so like rubber ball or a ping pong ball, something small, a couple of objects that you can set up, and if you want to create a nice launcher, some paper, tape, and a rubber band. So welcome to the Museum Education Center. This is where on STEAM Saturdays, when we're able to welcome you back, we'll have most of our activities and experiments, unless we decide to do some of these out on the floor of the museum as needed. So keep an eye on our website to see exactly where you go. But here I've got a little bit of a demonstration set up for you in which we're going to take these rubber bouncy balls here, and these are going to act as your radio waves that are being sent out and that are going to deflect back to you. Over here we've got a couple of objects. These are just plain old tubs that we have in storage here for education supplies. This larger one can be something like an enemy ship or something. The smaller one over here, it could be something like an aircraft formation, something else of that sort. Just pretend whatever you want to. In the end, most importantly, what they are is an object to be detected. So, in this case, I'm just going to use my hands. Some of you might get creative, make kind of a launcher for it, whatever else. So if you have a launcher, that's going to be your transmitting antenna. With me, it's going to be my hand, just so I can have a little bit more control over where it's going. If you want to get really fancy with it, you can actually set out angles. You can just go ahead and label angles at which, and you can try to determine what angles that ball is coming back to you from, things like that. But for the purposes of this, we're just getting a basic visual here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to roll a ball towards this, and there we go. It came back to me. And when it came back to me, that just tells me that there's an object right there, as opposed to right here. It didn't necessarily come back. Sometimes also it'll actually deflect in various directions, and so you'll have various difficulties when it comes to that sort of thing. But also you can hit it off a different angle, and you'll be able to tell a little bit more about the size of the object. Going at the more distant one, you'll see that it actually takes the ball a little bit longer to come back. And especially if you use a mechanical device and you see a lot of the same amount of pressure of energy moving out, then you'll see some of these take a little bit longer than others. Mine, I've been doing a little bit of variable speed, so it's a little bit harder to tell. Regardless, this is what gives you a little bit of a visual there of what you're looking for. A radar signal is going to move out. It's going to strike the object. It's going to come back again. And then from there, you are the receiver. You are calculating the data on what you might be seeing. So there are probably going to be a lot more elaborate experiments that are out on the internet. I do suggest you go ahead and take a look at those as well, as you should never be done researching. You should never be done exploring. And so you can do all sorts of neat activity, ranging from more sophisticated versions of the same piece to actually having like microchip sets and making your own kind of electronic radar system. So keep it up, keep experimenting, and enjoy. Now that we have seen a visual on how radar works, and we've seen a large set that you would have seen on a large battleship or aircraft carrier, what are we going to use when it comes to aircraft? Aircraft are gaining prominence during the Second World War. They have a larger distance. They are able to be used as forward observation. So we're going to have to develop smaller sets, such as the one over here, the ASB, the most common of these sets, among the most common of these sets, with kind of a piece sort of like this one underneath the wing that are going to send out signals. And they're going to be able to detect battleships at around 40 miles or so, and they're going to be able to detect submarines at around 5 or so miles. Aircraft similar to the Catalina over here, the Ventura or the Liberator, all of these are going to be various aircraft that the U.S. Navy are going to be used to kind of get eyes out, further out, so that we can get more and more warning. Because as we mentioned before, every second counts when it comes to saving sailors' lives and turning the tide of a battle. So developing these smaller systems will allow us to find these various different dangers further ahead of time. Also, another danger we haven't talked as much about, because we've talked about what you can't see over the horizon, how about what we can't really see under the sea? Starting in the First World War, you start seeing in the introduction and evolution of submarine warfare. That's going to be continuing through World War II, especially in the Atlantic, although also in the Pacific, certainly. And so finding these undersea threats before they could get within the picket line, within the formation of a carrier group, is a very important task, as a submarine hitting an aircraft carrier could be very devastating. So we send out these aircraft ahead of time with this radar. We find these submarines, and then you can send forth your destroyers, aircraft with death bombs, or other submarines to help take care of that threat ahead of time. All right, so here at the National Museum of the United States Navy, we have a lot of great dioramas as well as artifacts and other pieces you should check out. One that we often see missed is right here in this very section. So this is a little bit of how radar would kind of work from an aircraft. So you see the aircraft up in the far right-hand, upper right-hand corner there. He's going to send out signals down towards this submarine there, revealing its place as the submarine is now bouncing back those sound waves as we've talked before. So this is basically how anti-submarine operations could work, in which the aircraft goes towards a suspected area and the radar begins to work. After that point, they're going to go ahead and call in whatever forces are needed to take care of the threat. All right, so here we are in the Pacific section at the National Museum of the United States Navy, and you might be noticing some gloves right now. Whenever you handle artifacts, you have to do so safely. Finger oils can help corrode these artifacts, so whenever you're here, please be sure not to touch without museum staff and gloves present. That said, right here we've got an amazing piece that I can't help but touch with these safely with these gloves. This right here is a Model SQ radar. We talked about air, we talked about sea. How about land radar? This is a more portable unit that can be used to help set up in the islands that the U.S. forces are bouncing around in the Pacific theater. And by setting up these in various sections, we can help prevent hazards and dangers, or at least predict them a little bit more accurately. So right here you can see the antenna control unit as it spins around as you're searching for those signals to send out and back. And one thing we're searching for is going to be, and especially late in the war, suicide bombers, kamikazes, as well as the Oka bomb. We have one here, right here in the museum, a training model of those, so definitely come in and see that. But during the Battle of Okinawa in 1945, as the war is about to end, there's going to be a web, a whole net of these radar stations set up around the islands there to help predict where these suicide bombers are heading towards. It's going to save many lives of sailors, Marines, and soldiers on ships around the vicinity, because a devastating hit from one of those Oka bombs really could do a lot of human and physical damage to the vessel. So these are going to be life-saving measures right there. Being able to predict that is extremely important. So we've talked a little bit about technology. How about the people behind the technology? Because the U.S. Navy has a great deal of technology that you can really focus on, but without the human element, it's not going to work. And so, one of the initial rates that's going to occur is radarman. Radarman is going to be the initial specialists who are going to go to special U.S. Navy schools and figure out how to learn this new technology during the Second World War. And they're going to become vital parts of the Navy team. These individuals are going to have to stare at screens all day. They're going to have to be able to help repair, although there are also other mates that are going to be able to help with that aspect of it. But they are going to have a great deal of influence on the decisions made by higher commanders. So these enlisted individuals, and we often think about officers in the military, these enlisted individuals are extremely highly trained, as well as they are vital to the structure of a ship and a fleet. The radar man is going to be essentially the rate through World War II into the 1970s, when they're going to become operations specialists who have a much wider variety of tasks and jobs. So I definitely suggest that you go ahead to Navy.mil or somewhere else like that and find out more of what some of these individuals do. But it's quite the far sight from individuals who are going to be standing somewhere high and staring through a glass, which does take its own seasoned eye. It's all about the training, and so you're going to be trained in different ways for this, though. Because just because there are radar technicians does not mean you are getting rid of individuals with optics. Right here we have one itself that you're still going to need to see at a distance with and help to identify. Here at the museum, we have an amazing collection, and certainly if you go to the Homefront exhibit, you'll see a little bit more about the training these individuals go through. Just to be able to do some of this, you'll see in that exhibit anything ranging from ship models to help you identify by sight what type of ship, or even in some cases what specific ship that you are seeing at a distance. Also, we've got records, and still a somewhat new technology. I mean, it certainly had been around since the early 20th century, but That's going to be used to help record training, just as we sometimes see podcasts or MP3s or something like that today. So technology is being used, certainly, to aid in these individuals in their mission. However, it is the individuals themselves, it is the individual sailor that is going to make the biggest difference no matter what is being used. Anything ranging from a fancy radar, like we saw, to just a spyglass, in order to help gain the advantage as possible. As we move beyond World War II, we start to see different uses of radar coming out. One of which is going to be with the National Weather Service. The U.S. Navy is going to give some of their radar systems to the National Weather Service following World War II. And it's going to be used to help predict weather more accurately than before. During the war, we had actually had some radar operators who heard static and saw different little formations that actually turned out to be rain and other weather events. So it just made sense. Further developments are going to come about, including Doppler radar, which sends a signal out more frequently that is going to be able to actually determine movement of some of these as well. You might be familiar with this from your local weather channels, as these various measures of prediction are going to help save lives when it comes to hurricanes, typhoons, tornadoes, other formations. It even might get you out of school early on occasion. It's quite the amazing piece of equipment. Also, it still is used in aircraft. You're going to say anytime you take a trip across the country or even just down the coast on an aircraft, that aircraft's going to be equipped with radar, as is the air traffic controller on the ground, who's going to make sure that your plane lands safely and at the right area. Ships still use it as well, not just in the United States Navy, but also other navies around the world and civilian ships. If you've ever been on a cruise, they should be outfitted with one as well. And then many fishermen still try to use such things, smaller radar units themselves. Law enforcement uses a form of radar, even a radar gun in baseball, which is a slightly different style. It sends out kind of a wavelength that will increase in frequency as the ball approaches and gets closer, and it's going to help you read speeds. That sort of thing. So radar has a lot of effect on your everyday life. It is extremely important when it comes to public safety, and it can be found pretty much just about anywhere you look. But like any technology, there's a counter-technology, and especially in military technology. So we start seeing development of such things as stealth fighters, stealth bombers, and stealth ships, which use special construction materials, angles, as well as electronic countermeasures to slow the ability, to decrease the ability of radar to detect them. So an important hallmark of any good military mission is the debriefing. And your mission today was to learn a little bit about radar. So here are a few questions to help see how you did. Firstly, what is the name of the ship where the XAF radar was tested? What did the admiral who was involved in those tests, what did he suggest would be a good use for that radar? What ships should we put it on? What other objects other than ships were radar placed on? Like what other modes of transportation? Give me 3 uses of radar today. And then the final question is, just name 3 random facts that you learned today. Don't worry, we're not going to check your answers. This is more to see, self-evaluate, to see how you did, how much attention you paid. It's important to take each and every one of these lessons and think about, what did I just spend my time on? How did this come about? And where are we going? There's going to have to be a whole new revolution with younger individuals like yourselves who are going to continue along maybe in a science career, who might solve the issue of how do we detect these aircraft. And it might be a radar style, it might be something completely different. But that's why we study these things today. That's why we have our STEAM Saturdays. So be sure to come here to the National Museum of the United States Navy, check out some of the artifacts that I showed you here and then some, ask a staff member questions, Read all about the different developments in history, and be sure to join us for more STEAM Saturdays. Don't let this be the end of your research. There are plenty of different activities that you can find on the internet. You can find at our website, history.navy.mil, and other resources to help you learn more about history, more about our technology, and maybe inspire you to create something of your own in the future. Thanks for joining us.